in from the waiting room, but this is the 8th session on the South Carolina Home Attainability Forum. Today, we are discussing housing instability and solutions needed. We have 2 wonderful guests with us. I'm excited for them to be here and to share their perspective and share their expertise on housing affordability and some things that they're seeing at state level and local communities of what's needed here in South Carolina. I do want to start off and thank first our sponsors. Otherwise, this would not be possible. Start that off, we have Crescent Homes, Connolly Builders, Great Southern Homes, Hunter Quinn Homes, and Mungo Construction. I would certainly be remiss if I also did not give a major shout out to all of those community groups who have come together over the past probably 18 months or so now to put on all of these forums, and certainly not least of all is the Home Builders Association of South Carolina, who has really spearheaded all of these efforts for a considerable period of time now. So I just want to say thank you to them. My name is Nancy Lee. I'm the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity South Carolina. Habitat serves currently 33 counties in South Carolina. We have 29 affiliates and 27 restores, built, repaired, or rehabbed over 4,500 homes since 1978. So certainly all of these topics are near and dear to us. With us today, we have our guest speaker is Bernie Mazyck. He is the President and CEO of the South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development, known to most of us as SCACED. And then our special guest is Representative Ivory Torrey Thigpen. He is with the South Carolina House of Representatives. He is District 79 here in Richland County. And he's the chair-elect of the South Carolina Black Caucus, and we are grateful to him for joining us. He is also a practicing chiropractic physician and a pastor, and the church that he's a pastor at owns and operates a child care development center. So certainly very much in alignment and very much relevant to the topic that we're discussing today is regarding housing stability and the impact on families in the state. So just a reminder, and before I pass it on to Representative Thigpen, if you're just joining, make sure you put your name and your organization in the chat box so we know who is here, and make sure you keep your sound on mute. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Representative Thigpen.
Thank you so much, Nancy and Habitat Humanity. I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. I am indeed, as announced, Representative Ivory Thigpen of Richland County, District 79. It is a pleasure to be here with you as a special guest. I do not only represent myself, I see also my colleague, Representative Annie McDaniel on, who is a part of also our board, treasurer for the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus. I am the chair-elect, and I really appreciate what the Housing Coalition has done, is doing, and even this invitation allowing me to serve here as a guest at this 8th Home Attainability Forum. I'm excited, and I think the state as a whole is mounting with excitement as we look forward to learning about the solutions that will come from not only this session, but the work even prior to, that we can come together with the intent of passing policy that helps make housing more attainable, not just for my district and Richland County, but the entire state, and the many families that are affected for home attainability and sustainability still is the cornerstone of the lives of all the people that I represent and we all come in contact with. So again, I am humbled, I am honored to be able to be here with you to listen, to hear solutions that we can get from this session that ultimately will help our constituents grow stronger communities, make a stronger and better South Carolina. Particularly, I'm looking forward to hearing what Mr. Bernie Mazyck has to say and present to all of us as we work together. Truly, a coalition of this nature can truly make a difference. So again, to Habitat Humanity, South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development, and to all of the partners across the state that are working so hard to make this happen, it's an honor and a privilege to be here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative. again, this is a strong conversation that we're going to have today. I'm very grateful for Representative Thigpen and for Bernie Mazyck sharing their expertise with us, sharing their perspectives, things that they're seeing across the state, and potential solutions for us moving forward. Bernie Mazyck, I think, is no stranger to most of us on this call. He is the first president and CEO, and still there, obviously, with SCACED. He's been in place since 1998. He serves on countless boards across the state. Only going to name a few because he certainly has an impressive resume, but also including the Rural Resource Coalition of South Carolina, the Alliance for Healthier South Carolina, Center for Heirs Property. He is the past chairman of the National Alliance for Community Economic Development Associations out of Washington, D.C. He also is the 2004 recipient of the Order of the Silver Crescent from Governor Mark Sanford, and the 2014 recipient of the Order of the Palmetto from former Governor Nikki Haley. Worth pointing out that last one is the state's highest civilian honor for their service to the state. So we are grateful to have Mr. Bernie here with us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just hand it right over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Representative Thigpen, for being a part of this forum. And I also want to thank the Habitat for Humanity's Association of South Carolina and the Home Builders Association of South Carolina for your leadership in putting this much needed forum together. Housing is a critical component to a healthy and vibrant community. So the fact that you're putting this much attention to the issue of housing instability shows its importance to our state, to its vibrancy. And it is definitely a priority of the South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development. I'm going to share a little bit of who we are with our next slide. SCACED is a 27-year-old statewide trade association and nonprofit intermediary for organizations that are focused on improving the quality of life for low-wealth families in South Carolina. Our coalition is over 150 nonprofit organizations, affordable housing developers, financial institutions, local governments, just an array of stakeholders who recognize that every community in South Carolina, first of all, have assets. And it's just a matter of organizing those assets in a way that they could attract investment and thereby create wealth and create value. And so with that coalition, we work towards helping to build wealth throughout South Carolina. And our efforts sometimes focus primarily on communities of color who've been left out of the economic mainstream for quite some time. On our next slide, you'll see our vision and our mission. We envision an equitable South Carolina where all residents have access to tools and resources needed to create a vibrant and prosperous life. Is that equity that we continue to strive towards putting in place means that will help those that have been challenged in the past due to racism, due to other areas of marginalization, and try to give them the means to become prosperous. Our mission is executed through and with our members. SCACED as an organization doesn't do anything alone. We work in partnership with our members to help build wealth in low wealth communities and with low wealth families. And we do that primarily by advancing this agenda we call community economic development. And we do a great deal around public policy in South Carolina and also at the national level, and in some cases, local level as well. Next slide, Nancy. So when we talk about housing and housing attainability, there's a couple of data points that I think are important for us to really focus on. South Carolina is a state that has some challenges. Almost a quarter of the renters in South Carolina are cost burdened. That's a term that we use to recognize if you spend more than half of your income on rent and utilities, your cost burden. Now, national standards say that you should spend no more than a third of your income on housing and utilities. So you can imagine when someone has to spend half of their income or more on housing and utilities, they are definitely cost burdened. They're definitely challenged in being able to lead a vibrant and prosperous life. Also, almost every county in South Carolina, renters cannot find an affordable 2-bedroom apartment. Almost every county in South Carolina, we find that challenge. So that tells you we have quite a bit of work to do. Next slide, Nancy. So we also have some data points that show before the pandemic, and it probably is in a worse condition now than before, but before the pandemic, South Carolina had the highest eviction rate in the country. The highest eviction rate in the country. And we know now we're in a crisis situation because of the pandemic, that persons are being evicted as we speak. We do have resources in the state that is there to support and assist individuals to prevent evictions. And that program, SC Stay Plus, is operated by SC Housing. But the eviction condition and status in the state is atrocious. South Carolina also, again, before the pandemic, had 72,500 plus subsidized housing units that served about 20% of the low-income in the state, low-income renters in the state. And we think 72,000 subsidized units. That means those are subsidized with public funds. Now, there may be other units out there, but that's what we look to as a benchmark to let us know we have a lot more production that we have to do. 31% of owner and 62% of renter households have incomes at or below 80% of the area median income, which tells you from an income standpoint, South Carolina is challenged as well, where the income in the state, the incomes, what people are paid, the wages, do not measure up to the cost of individuals being able to attain housing. And 1 in 60 public school students do not have permanent housing. 1 in 60 students, public school students, do not have permanent housing. Now, we know students have enough challenges to deal with, but if they have the added challenge of unstable housing, that really puts a strain on their educational experience. Next slide, too. So we talk a lot about housing, sometimes as a social issue, but I'm here to tell you that housing is also an economic issue. Housing plays a role in attracting businesses to the state. I'll never forget a conversation I had with former Secretary Bobby Hitt, Secretary of Commerce, in talking about what are the in a state that attracts industry. What does a company that's looking to locate in a state, what are some of the main factors that they look to? And he shared with me that housing and the diversity of housing plays a major role in attracting industry to a state. This is one example where number 3 and number 4 priorities that a company is looking to, and they're looking to relocate an operation, is they're looking at the availability of affordable housing as well as affordability of affordable housing. So it's an economic issue as much as it is a social issue. Nancy, our slides kind of went away. There we go. So if we think about housing in terms of social, I'm here to tell you, no, it's economic as well. And one issue that is very dear to my heart, and Nancy, you were on the right slide. Housing also plays a role in attracting and retaining teachers. So when we're looking at what can a community do to make sure we can attract the best and brightest teachers, affordable housing is in the mix. So I just read a story of earlier this year. The Marion County School District purchased 3 affordable rental units to make available to teachers that they wanted to attract to the district. So housing, yes, is a social issue. Yes, it's an issue that focuses on and helps the state in economic recruitment and economic development. But it is also an issue that plays a role in attracting teachers to our state. So housing, as we're sharing, is vital to the vibrancy of our state, economically, socially, and culturally. Next slide, Nancy. So what are some of the policies that currently are in place that impact and can support attainable and affordable housing? South Carolina, during the 2020 session, Representative Thigpen played a role in this, passed the South Carolina Low-Income Housing Tax Credit bill. Tax credits are a means to support affordable housing. Really how the equation of housing works. For all intents and purposes, the cost of building a house is, and that's rental units as well as home ownership units, but the cost of building a house is constant, whether you're trying to build it for affordable purposes or market rate purposes. The cost is going to be consistent. What makes housing affordable are the subsidies and the other financial resources that go into that housing that makes the sale price and the rents affordable. And of course, with rental housing, you also have subsidies that help individuals to afford the rents. So low-income housing tax credits are one of the tools used to help housing that is available for renters affordable. There is a federal low-income housing tax credit. And so what South Carolina did was add to the federal a state low-income housing tax credit that for any units that are developed between January 1, 2020 and December 31st, 2030, they can avail themselves, housing developers can avail themselves of the state low-income housing tax credit. Now, that's what happened in 2019, 2020. Before that, the last major housing legislation that was passed in the state was passed in 1992. And that was the South Carolina Housing Trust Fund. Legislation was passed in 1992. It was a huge campaign, a huge effort to get our legislature to put that piece of legislation in place. And what it did was provide a constant revenue source for an affordable housing trust fund. And that trust fund today provides financial assistance in the development, rehabilitation, and acquisition of affordable housing for low-income households throughout the state. Right now, it focuses largely on home repair, for owner-occupied rehabs, and the creation or rehabilitation of supportive or group housing. So the Housing Trust Fund, which is supported by a doc stamp fee, or when a real estate transaction takes place, there are certain fees that's associated with that. And a part of that fee for every real estate transaction in the state goes into that housing trust fund. So it is a fund that provides reoccurring revenue or reoccurring financial assistance for the development of affordable housing. So we have those two pieces of legislation, two state policies that support the development and the attainability of affordable housing. Next slide, Nancy. But in addition to those two policies, SCACED has worked for a number of years in putting in place other policies that assist with the development of affordable housing. Back in 2000, working with the South Carolina legislature, there was a law passed called the South Carolina Community Economic Development Act. And it provided, or it authorized the state to provide grants, loans, and tax credits for certified community development corporations and community development financial institutions. And both of these organizations work on a variety of community development issues, but affordable housing is one of the main issues that these organizations support. The community development tax credits, and during the last legislative session, the General Assembly provided $3 million for the community development tax credits. This credit is a way of attracting private capital into community development projects. So if a state taxpayer, someone who pays taxes in the state of South Carolina, donated a certain amount of funding to a community development corporation or community development financial institution, they could get 50% of that contribution as a credit against their state tax liability. Half of what they contribute to that organization, they could get as a credit against their state tax liability. That's a pretty strong incentive to attract private money into housing and other community development projects. If they invest, meaning that at some point in time they'll get some of their money back, they'll get 33%. We call that an equity investment. This past year, the first tranche of those tax credits were made available this year. $1 million in credits were made available. Actually, I'm going back because the credits have just been issued for this year. But the last time the credits were available, which was 2019, and $1 million in credits were available. Among the many products that came out of that investment of contributions and investment in community development projects, there were 321 units of affordable housing developed as a result of those tax credits. So the community development tax credit plays a role in developing affordable housing. In addition to the tax credits, this past year of the legislative session, the General Assembly appropriated $2 million in the Community Economic Development Fund, which will go out as grants to certified community development corporations and community development financial institutions. So these are not policies that are directly connected to affordable housing, but they play an impact. They have an impact on the development of affordable housing. And we're very excited about those resources being available through the General Assembly. Next slide, please. So in addition to these policies that are available to assist with the development of affordable housing, we have a huge opportunity before us with the American Rescue Plan. A lot of you may have heard about the American Rescue Plan, and you should, because it potentially will be the most transformative program in transforming many of our communities and our state that we have seen maybe since the Great Society programs. So South Carolina will receive anywhere between $4 billion and $8 billion. It's more like $4 billion in funding from the American Rescue Plan. A good amount of that will be decided on and prioritized by the General Assembly. Representative Thigpen will play a role in prioritizing how those funds will be allocated. Some of those funds are going to go directly to counties and local units of government. Every county in South Carolina will receive or may have already received their portion of the American Rescue Plan funds. And that county will prioritize how those dollars are going to be allocated. The towns and cities, and I think pretty much every town and city in South Carolina, will also have access to the American Rescue Plan funds. So for the $2.5 billion that the General Assembly will be prioritizing, we have an opportunity to advocate for some of those funds to be devoted to affordable housing production. SCACED is recommending 40 million of that to be devoted to affordable housing production, primarily around rental housing. The Habitat Association is recommending $50 million for the development and rehab of affordable housing. So between our two organizations, and we support Habitat's proposal to secure, we're talking about a package for affordable housing in South Carolina of close to $100 million. We think that that is a minimal amount of funding that we should look at for affordable housing development through the American Rescue Plan. It could probably be more than that, but we also have to be reasonable because the way the federal program operates, those dollars have to be obligated and spent within 4 years. So we want to also be able to ensure that we are recommending a funding level that we have the capacity to deploy and be able to put in production units of housing. So that is at the top of our list, affordable housing. We also, SCACED is recommending about $125 million to be allocated for micro and small business development, and then another $10 million for an individual development account program, which can assist individuals in either buying their first house. And it can play a role in incentivizing individuals to save, and those savings will be matched so that they can buy their first house. So those are some of the priorities that we are leaning into right now, and we encourage you to support both recommendations coming from Habitat and from SCACED, and we can talk more about that later on. Next slide, Nancy. So in addition to these policies that are in place currently and potential policies that we are encouraging the legislature to consider, we think there are also some other solutions to assist in the development and retention of affordable housing. There is a policy called Inclusionary Zoning. This is a tool that local government can use if they were authorized to do so. It allows local government to authorize the imposition of inclusionary zoning as a means of ensuring that affordable housing is in the mix of a housing development project. As many of you know, developers will come to a unit of local government and ask for approval for zoning for their housing development. And a lot of times, most of the times, those housing developments are market rate or above. They're not affordable. So what local government could do, if authorized, is to require, if a developer comes with a project, and that project, especially if that project, the units are above the zoning, the zoning designation, that local government then can negotiate with that developer to say, well, we'll give you the zoning approval if you will assure that 10 to 20% of your development is going to be affordable housing. So inclusionary zoning is one of those tools. The reason we have that is there is a policy solution in South Carolina. The legislature has not given local government the authority to impose inclusionary zoning. That would take legislative action at the state level. There are also some other policy solutions like tenant protections to reduce evictions, and this involves the right of counsel to help individuals before they are evicted. That would help keep people in their homes as opposed to being evicted so easily. And then housing preservation is another policy strategy that will support owner-occupied repairs, where in South Carolina we have quite a bit of housing, but it's usually substandard housing. And so every means we can come up with to help preserve housing stock and improve housing stock in South Carolina, we want to do that. Next slide, please. We also want to encourage certain strategies that will help in the effort around advocacy. All of what we're talking about here, as I've spoken to you about, is helping to affect policy so that we can convince our legislators, Representative Thigpen's colleagues, to put in place the kinds of policies that's going to really assist residents in securing and retaining affordable housing. So one of the areas that we see a need is a focus on rural housing development. We need to create the kind of caucus, legislative caucus, if you will, within the General Assembly that focuses on rural affordable housing. Housing in rural areas is really challenged. Resources are not in rural areas to the level that they are in urban areas. So as a result, rural areas often are challenged in developing affordable housing, retaining affordable housing, and repairing affordable housing. That is going to take, we think, legislative fix in order to ensure that all of the rural counties and jurisdictions in South Carolina have an equal opportunity to develop and retain affordable housing. So we want to recommend and encourage the legislature to convene a rural caucus that will focus on rural housing development. We also want to encourage a statewide housing coalition that can play a major role in focusing on the issue of affordable housing in the state. And that caucus, we would encourage, looks at housing from a very broad perspective, not just in one area like LIHTC, but looking at the policies, the resources, and the strategies that are needed to make sure affordable housing is available across the board. And so we encourage there to be such a statewide housing coalition, similar to the North Carolina Housing Coalition, that is a very robust statewide coalition, has 30 years track record of really moving policies forward in North Carolina that helps the residents there to attain and secure affordable housing. And then we also want to encourage coalitions to focus on housing for returning citizens. Those are folk that are coming out of our correction system who paid their debt to society. And now we're trying to bring them back into full citizenship within our communities. Oftentimes, persons that are leaving our correction system have barriers. You have renters, those who own rental housing that will not rent housing to returning citizens. It's difficult for returning citizens to access home ownership opportunities. And so we need to be able to focus on policies that's going to assist returning citizens in securing safe, sanitary, and affordable housing. So I think that pretty much covers my presentation. Nancy, if you can go to the next slide. But this in a broad sense is what we are encouraging you to think about. These are some of the strategies that we've put in place, and we've worked with our state legislators. And I would say, you know, I'm pleased with how our legislators have worked with us. But it is going to take even more voices out there engaging state policymakers about the importance of affordable housing or attainable housing or workforce housing, however you might want to frame it. But we need more voices to continue the messaging, to give the stories, to share the examples of why affordable housing is critical to the citizens of South Carolina. So I'll pause there if there are questions that folk may have. And Nancy, however you might want to facilitate this part of the program, I'll answer questions I can answer, and those that I can't answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer, but we'll try to get it to you.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that presentation. And like I said earlier, there will be we are recording this, so we'll put that up on the website. And Bernie, if you're okay, I can also attach those slides, so I'll put that information up there as well. I'll send a follow-up email just so you guys are aware that has those links, and then we'll also have Bernie's information. I'm also going to share a link, Bernie. I hope this is okay. The proposal SCACED has put together the recommendations for use with the American Rescue Plan, the ARPA funds that he was talking about, those 3 buckets for the business loans, the IDA, and the $40 million for affordable housing. I'm going to put a link in there. There is opportunity to sign on. I think there's four more days to sign on. So I'll send that out if folks want to join. Habitat South Carolina has signed on. I know a lot of our affiliates, hopefully all of our affiliates will get there before the deadline, but it's something that Habitat supports as well. Housing, as Bernie has mentioned, it's truly a continuum. We each have our parts of where we specifically focus our particular work, but we recognize the need is broad. So us all partnering together, you know, love the concept of a coalition. That's something that works well in many states, and North Carolina certainly has a strong one. But we kind of ad hoc right now, folks informally get together and we discuss, you know, we share our recommendations, we support each other's recommendations. You know, Bernie mentioned $50 million that Habitat has put before the General Assembly in the hopes of focusing on affordable homeownership and rehabilitation. I believe it was the House subcommittee on ARPA, it might have been Senate, but I think it was the House, where the South Carolina Office of Resilience proposed, I believe it was a total of $90 million for disaster response. So I believe it was $40 million to catch up for just to kind of keep up with the increase in cost of lumber to meet their goal of 500 homes. And then the additional $50 million would be to serve another 450 homes through hurricane, through disaster response. But using those funds, it aligns with populations that have been hit hardest by the pandemic. And that's something that we really want to get, we want to focus on both of these funds with policy solutions and looking at, you know, COVID is a prime example of, you know, if you're underbanked, if you're unbanked, if you don't have a lot of assets, if you are living paycheck to paycheck, the slightest thing can truly and seriously impact your livelihood and your quality of life. And so making sure that we're looking at those things that we can overcome together to make it more affordable for folks to live. So there is more money that's going in their pockets that can help them with food, with transportation, with childcare, with stability. These are all things that are very, very relevant. Something I should have said before I went on that spill, I was trying to give everybody time and I realized I didn't, is if you have questions, if you want to put those in the chat box, we'll certainly try to answer those as best as we can. And we have Representative Thigpen here to help us, and Bernie. If you have questions that you don't feel comfortable asking, you can send them just to me, or send us an email afterwards and we can shuffle them to the right folks and see if we can point you in the right direction.
Nancy, if I can also really emphasize, and you and I are talking largely about the $2.5 billion that the General Assembly will prioritize. But like I said earlier, every unit of government, county government and local government, will have access to the ARPA funds. You, as citizens where you are, you can advocate to your local elected official as to how they may want to prioritize some of those local funds. And in some cities and units of government, I know, for example, in the city of North Charleston and the city of Charleston, they have already set up a grant program for nonprofits. So if you are a nonprofit housing developer out there, depending on where you're located, you can approach your unit of government. You can find out how much ARPA funds they're receiving, and you can encourage them to devote some of those dollars to affordable housing production. So, like I said, we're in a time unprecedented resources coming to our state, and we have the potential of changing the paradigm for our state, especially for our most marginalized communities. Representative Thigpen, I don't know whether you want to offer anything towards that, but we're excited about working with you and the Black Caucus to also advance these issues as well.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak again. I don't want to be remiss without recognizing our chair, who is also on chair of the South Carolina Legislative Black Caucus, Representative Pat Hennigan. But I know, speaking on behalf of myself, the Black Caucus, the legislature as a whole, we do see the importance of the issues that you have highlighted. And again, not only securing these funds, but making sure that the resources get deployed to the appropriate persons in local and our communities is so important. And I can't say enough that I'm excited about the opportunity that we have, but I want to make sure that it's not one that's squandered. And I do believe as we seek to build a stronger coalition, we can connect a lot of the dots to ensure that individuals can have sustainable and have access to home attainability. So I look forward and encourage persons to become more engaged and active, and we're going to do our job at the legislature to maximize these dollars as much as possible.
Thank you so much. And Nancy, I got a chance to see some of the questions that were sent earlier. If you don't mind, one question in particular, which is a good question, asking how much federal funding was offered and received for low and middle income housing in South Carolina. That's a very good question. And like I said, if I don't know the answer, I will tell you I don't know. I don't know the total dollar amount that is available to South Carolina for affordable housing. What I do know is that South Carolina, even beyond the American Rescue Plan, South Carolina consistently receives community development block grant funds that can be used for affordable housing development. And we have 11 cities in South Carolina receive community development block grant funds directly from HUD. They're called entitlement cities. And then there are 6 entitlement counties in our state. So those 17 units of government, they get money directly from HUD in the form of what we call community development block grant funds. And those funds can be used for affordable housing development and support. And then in addition to those units of government, the Department of Commerce receives annually a pot of community development block grant funds for a variety of uses. But again, some of that is also dedicated to affordable housing production. So you have those pots of money coming in annually, even beyond the American Rescue Plan. Now, with the American Rescue Plan, and you also receive home funds through our state housing finance agency. But concerning the American Rescue Plan, over $4 billion is coming to the state. $1 billion of that, as I said earlier, is shared by every county, all 46 counties, share in the 1 billion. And then there's 191 million that is shared by all metro cities in the state. So if you're in a metropolitan area, your unit of government is sharing 191 million, or is receiving some of that 191 million. And then if you're in non-entitlement units of government, you're sharing 435 million of the American Rescue Plan fund. So that's just giving you a sense of how much money, at least through the American Rescue Plan, through community development block grant funds, through public assistance for affordable housing. So we have many opportunities, but it is going to require some strong advocacy to make sure that those dollars are devoted to affordable housing. So I give that information.
I'm gonna piggyback on that a little bit and stay from the ARPA funding for the state, total, counting local, and as far as what's regulated from Congress and from Treasury, of that 4.1-ish billion dollars, excuse me, it's 481 million of that is purposely allocated for housing assistance. So that seems like a lot, but I want to go into detail and just kind of clarify, because it can be a little misleading. Of that, 232 million of that is going to the state government, and it's for emergency rental assistance. And 42 million is going to local government for emergency rental assistance. So this is the SC State Plus program that you're seeing at the state level. You're seeing at local levels, where it's assistance for your monthly payment for your rent, for your utilities, for costs that you have incurred throughout the pandemic if there is a financial hardship. But it is specific. It is allocated for those monthly expenses. It's not for new production. It's not to help people get into more stable housing. It's very necessary Band-Aid, but it is a Band-Aid. Of that 140, of that 481 now, so that was quick math here, 275-ish. 145 million is on the equivalent for the homeownership side. So that's mortgage assistance, utility assistance. If you live in a home that you own, it's owner occupied, and you're having difficulties with making your mortgage payment, making utilities, again, related to a hardship due to COVID. That program has not yet, it's not been launched. As soon as it is, I'm pretty sure everybody on this call, speakers and presenters, will be pushing that information out, but that is to come. So those are two buckets of that 481 million. It's a significant amount of money that is, again, just monthly payments trying to get through this current hardship. And then there was an additional 62 million for homelessness assistance. So I point that out because as we're talking about housing and the need for it, there has not yet, at least the state level, but no decisions have been made at the state level, but when we're talking about the need for affordable and attainable housing, there is nothing yet that is specific for what we've been discussing here today. And so we really want to make sure that those are items that are front and center, everybody's aware of. We're excited about to see and encouraged to see what's going to come, because there really is an opportunity for this to be transformational for South Carolinians. That has a ripple effect down to jobs and to companies and to tax dollars. I mean, it's across the board. I know at Habitat, for each in 2020, each new house that we built, it created 10 new jobs, and there was a direct economic impact for $1.2 million in the state of South Carolina for each single one new house that we built. So it's just a snapshot of what can be done beyond changing those individual households' lives. What is that bigger picture as well? So just want to put that out there. So when you hear that 481 million, I really wanted to bring home that it's more on individual assistance, not preservation, not development. I'm going to pause there and see. Bernie, you look like you have something.
It's interesting, Nancy. I was looking at a question in the chat saying that not all counties in South Carolina use the community development block grant for housing, and you're absolutely right. The eligible entitlement counties that draw community development block grant funds, they determine within the guidelines of HUD how they're going to use those funds. Again, it's going to require local voices to say to that county, affordable housing is important. And it may not change overnight, but if you constantly make the case to that county government that you need to use some of these CDBG funds for housing, eventually change will occur. But you're absolutely right. Not all counties do that. And like I said, there are 6 entitlement counties. It is going to require a vigilant voice to that county government to say that affordable housing is important, and we need you to devote a certain amount of those dollars for affordable housing. But I'd also say, while you're making that case, you should also have the ability to say, we have a Habitat for Humanities in the county that can produce the affordable housing, or we have a community development corporation that can work with us to produce that housing. So, for example, I'm in conversations right now, Nancy, with your affiliate in Georgetown, who's working with Councilman Carolina, who is committed to affordable housing in Georgetown County. And Councilman Carolina is trying to convince his colleagues on council to devote some of the dollars coming to Georgetown County for affordable housing development. But his argument is very strong because he has a habitat there that can work with him and articulate to him, to his colleagues, that they have the ability and the capacity to produce that housing there in Georgetown County. So more to come with that.
That's a very good point. There are a lot of questions coming into the chat box, so we may have to follow some of these up afterwards, but there is one on here. Bernie, I'm going to toss this to you if this is something that you want to tackle. It says property taxes funding education is only increasing economic disparity. How can we change the education funding model?
Oh, that's way above my pay grade, way above my pay grade. Education model for funding local government, funding schools is a constant challenge in the state. The last wholesale education reform we had, Governor Dick Riley was in office. So that's been a long time ago. And so we have a whole new generation of folk in place now. It's going to take a mammoth effort to look at how local school districts are funded. And you're right, the real estate model, real estate tax model is something that has created inequities. Because if you have an Allendale school district funded through local taxes, you're not going to get the same kind of financial support there as you would in Charleston County or in Richland County or Greenville County. So there are inequities built into the model. And so it's going to take some very smart people, smarter than I am, to work on that issue, but it can be done. And it is going to require folk coming to the table and saying, we have to change this model because the current educational funding model just creates disparities.
Very, very, very good answer. I'm also going to point back and give kudos to the collaborative committee that 10 or 15 organizations that really come together to put on this housing attainability, these different sessions. There was a session on a property tax study. So when I send out a follow-up email, this is the 8th session. So I think all but one maybe have been recorded, but there's some information that would be a good session for the individual who asked that question. That's a good one, kind of a place to start. It's based looking at South Carolina. It was a partnership with, probably gonna say this wrong. I think it was the Urban Land Institute, but don't quote me on that. And the SC Chamber of Commerce, their foundation. So it was a great partnership. It was a great session. There's some information online that we can send out to everybody. There was also a question in the chat box about zoning questions. I know there were a couple things density related sent beforehand. Little plug on September 30th at 1 p.m. It's a Thursday. There is a session on discriminatory practices, and it includes discussing density issues and zoning. So certainly there's more to come related to that.
Nancy, there's one last question there that asks, is there anyone who can help counsel local folk on or a template to assist speaking to local government effectively? I'm just going to be bold and say, Nancy, why don't you and I collaborate on putting together a training? I know that we've also worked in the past with Together SC, the Statewide Nonprofit Association, on advocacy training. So since Nancy has your contact information, I'd say let's look for a training that'll be upcoming about how do we engage local government. We were fortunate a few weeks ago to host the CEO of an organization out of North Carolina called MDC. It's a think tank on how to create transformative change for communities. So I feel comfortable that we can engage MDC and others to give us the best tips on how to engage local government so that you can have the tools, because you're going to be the best advocate. We are not, I'm not. But you as a constituent of your local government is the best voice to tell them what's needed. So I think it's important, and I think Nancy and I can work on putting something together that will give you some of those tips. And Nancy, I'm sorry I put you on the spot like that.
No, you're keeping up with the questions better than I am. We still have some folks that I think are getting knocked off and coming back on, so I'm trying to let everybody in. So thank you for that. There was a question, and I just responded about Habitat for Humanity. Happy to, when I send the message out, you'll have my email, but happy to have those conversations, let folks know where we're at, where we're not, what other partners are in the counties that we are in, and what partners are in the counties that we aren't in as well. Habitat is one housing organization. We work very, very well and collaborate with others, but certainly want to recognize and make sure that we're connecting you guys with everybody who's in your area. The same with SCACED. We'll look and see if we have time for one more question, and then we will, let's see if I can find one quickly. I think they're all pretty much going to be about that. There was a question about infrastructure help. That might be something we can talk about on the side. There's opportunity with the ARPA funds on that side, but there's some longer term issues there. Even wrote a note here. Bernie had some of those initial slides, the ones with the map. That was something pulled from Dr. Brian Grady's report, the SC Housing. They did a 2019, I believe, and a 2020 housing assessment and kind of housing needs snapshot. In some of the research that Dr. Grady pulled down, it talked about, and I don't have those stats right in front of me, but talked about, the number of houses in South Carolina that didn't have running water, that didn't have a bathroom, that didn't have a kitchen, and they were certainly alarming. So there's infrastructure costs associated with building new, but there's also some needs to the point for existing homes, and then going in and looking at within the homes themselves, what can we do preservation-wide to make sure that we bring them up to scale. With that, she may have popped off. There was one person, I think it was Ms. McDaniel, that had her hand raised, but Daniel, do you want to say anything before we close up?
Oh, I apologize. I had hit it by mistake, but I do appreciate the opportunity, and definitely Vice Chair of the Black Caucus, Ivory Thigpen, for acknowledging the fact that I was on. I've been truly interested in affordable housing. Fairfield County suffers, which is one of my counties in my district, suffers extremely from lack of affordable housing, as well as portions of Chester. But one of the things I wanted to express and share, and hopefully you guys can help, and I'm not sure if you can, is when Secretary Hood was here, the funding that came down for the rental assistance, a lot of us was taken aback of the slowness in which that money was being dispatched, if you will, to the various people who are renters. And we know that the eviction impacted those who rent as well as those who does the renting. They're both negatively impacted, and that money would have assisted with the renters as well as those who do the rent. And I think things have picked money into the state. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that it does not dampen the transformation of what all this money coming out from the federal government can do. Is some of the restrictions that's on the money, and I know a lot of my constituents called me, have really caused problems with them being able to access the funds that have come in that are supposed to help them, whether it's for the down payment, whether it's for the rental assistance, whether it's for the light bill, or whatever that need is that money is supposed to provide. So like I said, I'm not sure what we all can do, but I hope that there's something that we can do to help make sure that the information is pushed even farther down to those actual individuals so that they can get their hands on the money. I know the General Assembly is doing what they're trying to do, county government, but, and this is my last plug, and a lot of folk may not like it, but people who know me know I'm real, is that no matter what policies you put in place, they're not going to be any greater than the people you elect. So we got to make sure that we elect the county council members, legislators, and those persons who are going to work hard to make sure that any funds that come into the state, especially during this following and during this pandemic, that's going to make South Carolina and can make our rural areas transformational in a very positive way, that it actually happens. And I apologize for talking so long, but I definitely thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Representative McDowell, you're hitting an issue right on the head. And concerning the rental assistance funding, you're absolutely right. There were barriers with documentation requirements and other policies that Washington loosened a lot of those, and I think even SC Housing has begun to loosen some of those requirements. And so, yes, you're right that the faucet has opened up a little bit more. We want to see it continue to open up. And so hopefully we're going to see a more responsive flow of those dollars to the renters who need them, and those building owners, property owners that need those funds as well for those units to remain affordable. But just continue to keep your vigilance with asking the questions and pushing for the program to be effective.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Dr. Mazyck.
And just to, we'll close it on that note. I want to thank Representative McDaniels and Murphy for those comments on the SC Stay Plus program, the emergency rental assistance. And I do want to say that there has been a lot of progress. I believe it was the July report to Treasury where SC Housing had distributed, I think it was right around $3 million to less than 500 households. Since then, I haven't seen the latest numbers, but in some of my conversations, I think now it's between $14 and $18 million since some of the paperwork restrictions, some of the guidelines have been loosened up a little bit. So we're starting to see the money flow. And I know there's a couple comments in the chat box. SC Housing's, working with partners and trying to make sure that there's challenges with making sure that things are making sure there are opportunities, that recognizing not everybody has access to transportation or broadband, being able to get online, are they translated properly? So there are a lot of concerns there. So I just want to echo and say, please keep raising those concerns. We want to make sure that we get the money, and the money that we get is going where it needs to go, and it's getting to those in need and getting where it's intended. That's on the rental side. We're going to see the same thing. Hopefully there's some lessons learned when the homeowner assistance fund is rolled out, and then certainly with the addition of these other ARPA dollars with the fiscal recovery fund portion of that act. On that note, there are a lot of other great questions. I'll pull those offline so we can look at those. I want to thank Bernie Mazyck for his presentation today, and I want to thank Representative Ivory Thigpen for his time as well in joining us. And again, our sponsors who put this together and made this possible are Crescent Homes, Connolly Builders, Great Southern Homes, Hunter Quinn Homes, and Mungo Construction. And all of this effort before you today is spearheaded by the Home Builders Association of South Carolina and their partners. But without them and their brilliance and their passion for housing, we would not be having these sessions. The next one is going to be held, like I said, on Thursday, September 30th at 1 p.m. And there was a little bit of hiccup with the date this time, so I went and double checked, and it is correct on the website. It is Thursday, September 30th. I appreciate everybody's understanding and patience with my typo this week. We'll send out, again, a follow-up email that has these links. The recording for this session should be online, pending no IT issues, should be online by end of day tomorrow. So you can access it there as well. As many of the questions we can answer, we will. And I'll send out our contact information in the follow-up email. Representative Thigpen, is there anything else you or Bernie would like to say before we conclude? All good? All right. Well, I'm come off. Well, thank you everybody for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at another session.
Thank you.